اليوم هو نكمل ناخذ الادرينال جلاند. تطرقنا بالمحاضرات السابقة للثايرويد بنكرياتيك هرمون. نروح نتعرف اليوم على الادرينال جلاند and its hormone synthesis function and some disorder of the adrenal gland and their product. Adrenal gland, usually two adrenal gland, each weighed 4 grams, lie at the superior poles of the two kidneys, and two distinct parts, adrenal medulla and adrenal cortex, consist of two parts, adrenal medulla and adrenal cortex. Adrenal medulla is a central part, consists of component of 20% of the gland, is function related to the sympathetic nervous system. The adrenal medulla, the center of the adrenal gland, about 20% of the gland, and is function related to the sympathetic nervous system. It secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline, in response to the sympathetic stimulation. طبعا احنا راح نجي نشوف انه الادرينال جلاند secretion of adrenal medulla specifically occur in response to the sympathetic stimulation and also by the effect of the hypothalamus pituitary axis. يعني both sympathetic, nervous and hormonal by the hypothalamus pituitary axis will affect the adrenal medulla or adrenal part of adrenal medulla of the adrenal gland to secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. The other part of the adrenal gland is adrenal cortex, which secrete corticosteroid. Then two parts that form the adrenal medulla. The adrenal corticosteroid hormones are called mainly corticosteroid hormones. Mineralocorticoid, glucocorticoid, and androgen to the small amount. Mineralocorticoid, from its name, it's affected electrolyte. Can affect the mineral, which is mainly sodium and potassium. Mineralocorticoid that secreted from the adrenal cortex affect the electrolyte, mainly the minerals of the extracellular fluid, sodium and potassium in particular. Glucocorticoid is another important hormone secreted from the adrenal cortex that affect it on the carbohydrate, protein, and lipid metabolism. It increases blood glucose concentration. In addition, its effect on the protein and fat metabolism. More than 30 steroids have been isolated from the adrenal cortex. Aldosterone is the principal mineralocorticoid. Aldosterone is the principal hormone of the mineralocorticoid of the adrenal cortex, while cortisol is the principal glucocorticoid hormone for the glucocorticoid from them. Androgen, as you know, it is also part of adrenocorticosteroid hormone, which are responsible for the sex differentiation and secondary sexual character. The adrenal cortex consists of 2-3 layers. First, zona glomerulosa, about 15% of the adrenal cortex. It is a thin layer of cells that lie just underneath the capsule and secrete aldosterone. وقلنا الالدوستيرون secretion هو represent the mineralocorticoid hormone for the adrenal cortex. Its secretion, aldosterone, is controlled by extracellular fluid, concentration of angiotensin and potassium, which stimulate aldosterone secretion. راح نشوف احنا خلال المحاضرة انه control for the release and secretion of aldosterone from the zona glomerulosa, from the adrenal cortex. It's under the effect, as well as to the ACTH from the pituitary gland. It also controlled by the extracellular fluid and by the angiotensin renin angiotensin system, and by the mineralized mainly potassium and sodium that control the release of this hormone. Second layer in the adrenal cortex is zona fasciculata, composed of 75% of the adrenal cortex, which is middle widest layer, secrete glucocorticoid, cortisol, corticosterone, and to small amount of adrenal and estrogen. The secretion is controlled by hypothalamus. معك سؤال. هطلع اكو صوت هسه.
دكتور
وين؟ الو يسأل اكو صوت هسه؟ اي مشكلة، بس مشكلة بالكهرباء. السلايد وين انتوا سمعت الصوت؟ رقم 4 هذا حكينا غير سمعتوه؟ هذه اللي هنا على اللاير اوف ادرينال كورتكس، ما سمعتوه؟ ما سمعنا. شلون؟
وصلنا الزون الارتفاعات الثالثة.
إذا نكمل بال layers of adrenal cortex، وأخذنا قلنا والثيرد layer هي الزونا reticularis. This deep layer of the cortex secrete adrenal androgen and the hydroabundant derivatives and small amount of estrogen glucocorticoid. CTH secreted from the pituitary gland regulates secretion of these cells اللي هي zona reticularis, and cortical hormone released from the pituitary may also be for hormone اللي هو cortical stimulating hormone, although secreted from the pituitary gland can't control these of these hormone from the zona reticularis. الصورة هذا البيكتشر قلنا هي على الادرينال جلاند كومبوزيشن. ات ذا سنتر عندنا الادرينال ميدلا واللي سكريت ابنفرين نورابنفرين، وعندنا الادرينال كورتكس والثري لايرز اللي هي جلوميرولاتا ريتيكولاريس وايريت سبيسيفيك هرمون. جلوميرولازا هو الميل الاندوستيرون. عندنا secrete corticosteroid والreticularis secrete estrogen. These all the renal gland, the control of these hormone release hormone usually by the sympathetic nervous system and by the hypothalamus pituitary, both by the sympathetic and via the hypothalamus pituitary. Adrenocortical hormones are steroid in nature. The main precursor synthesis of the adrenocortical synthesis in the liver, you refer to the different tissues, to the cells by biotensin. Repeat them and increased number of adrenocortical cell receptors for low density lipoprotein, as well as the activity of enzymes that separate cholesterol from the LDL. كنا الكوليسترول هو synthesis in the liver and will be deliver cleaved by the enzyme اللي هو cholesterol dismolase to form pregnenolone. This is the first step in the synthesis of in the of the corticosteroid hormone هو conversion of cholesterol inside the conversion of the cholesterol to the initial. This initial step, but after the hormone, this by adrenal steroid synthesis. As we said, it is the main precursor cholesterol for the synthesis of the corticosteroid hormone, and by the enzyme dismolase will be inside the cell convert the cholesterol to the pregnenolone. Then شوفون عندنا بالdiagram عندنا 3 steps for the synthesis or 3 steps for the of this well and we love synthesis type of step to the convert progesterone in this pathway called time. أنا بالدايجروم اللي بعده ذاكر الانزيم that responsible for the of the synthesis corticosteroid. فإحنا نرجع إنه كل خطوة of وهذا البروجسترون convert to the deoxycorticosterone by 21 enzyme, where 21 deoxycorticosterone convert to the corticosterone by the 11. إذا هنا كل خطوة هي under the effect of certain enzymes that convert each specific compound to another. The end result, formation of the aldosterone اللي هو the main mineralocorticoid hormone. At the same time, certain hydrate a major component of the glucocorticoid. نلاحظ انه ان الباثوي اللي from the pregnenolone by 14 enzyme for turns pregnenolone the serum testosterone androgen. احنا هذا for the synthesis of the steroid hormone are very important. Why? Because any deficient enzyme that responsible for the conversion certain compound to the another, it will lead to the deficient in the synthesis of a major hormone, which is or androgen, as we see in the disorder. And this is lead to the different other hormone cholesterol where كل بعد will lead to the formation of steroid, formation of the aldosterone. The second هو glucocorticoid. The third هو الاندروجين. وقلنا احنا بالنسبه للسات هاي الانزيم اللي مسؤوله عن synthesis او الباثوي for the steroid hormone نذكرها هنا alone for each step for the synthesis of this hormone. The next slide هو احنا قلنا الادرينال كورتيكوستيرويد mainly two part اللي هو glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid. These two hormones are differ in their potency. يعني عندنا القوة types of function مالت. أنا عندنا على سن كتر أدوية موجودة الجلوكوكورتيكويد and corticoid ونشوف نلاحظ البوتنسي مالتها نشوف السيكونس مال السايد افكت قد يكون لاحظ مثل عندنا الهيدروكورتيزون potency of glucocorticoid effect هو 1 and has larger effect of mineralocorticoid. السكند هو بريدنيزون أو بريدنيزولون have 3 to 5 potency of glucocorticoid effect and to lesser extent mineralocorticoid. Prednisolone and dexamethasone are more potent in glucocorticoid again have no effect in mineralocorticoid. لذلك قلنا هاي عبارة عن scientific drug هو عمل الاندوجينوس هرمون اللي هو الجلوكوكورتيكويد او المينرالكورتيكويد هو الالدوستيرون. لذلك احنا من نعطي هذه الدرج نشوف شنو تاثيرها على الجلوكوكورتيكويد او على المينرالكورتيكويد. اللاس هو الفيدروكورتيزون which is very potent mineralocorticoid and to lesser extent have a glucocorticoid effect. Then the importance of these drug it is similar to the endogenous hormone اللي هو الcorticosteroid hormone and should be know what is the effect of their effect either glucocorticoid or mineralocorticoid. احنا راح نتعرف بالسلايدات القادمه على شنو الافكت اوف glucocorticoid وشنو الافكت اوف mineralocorticoid. أنا انطيت هنا example of certain drugs have both gluco and mineralocorticoid effect. The biochemical action of adrenocorticosteroid first mineralocorticoid اللي هو الالدوستيرون. It promotes sodium reabsorption at the distal convoluted tubules of the kidney. Sodium retention is accompanied by corresponding secretion of potassium, hydrogen, and ammonia ion. Mainly potassium and hydrogen. Then the main action or function for the aldosterone هو reabsorption or retention of the sodium and enhance secretion of the potassium hydrogen ion. الeffect of glucocorticoid اللي هو الكورتيزول has many wide range on the metabolic activity of the body. First, effect on the glucose metabolism. They promote gluconeogenesis, the formation of the glucose. They work with the insulin from the pancreas to maintain blood glucose level in the proper balance. طبعا هو الكورتيزول يعتبر increase the blood glucose level and contrast or in against the action of the insulin. لذلك بث الكورتيزول and insulin بالإضافة إلى الجلوكاجون طبعا اللي حكينا عليه بالمحاضرة السابقة are important hormone to maintain normal level of blood glucose. هنا عندنا الكورتيزول it is increase the level of blood glucose. Second effect on the lipid metabolism, they increase lipolysis in adipose tissue and synthesis of increase lipolysis breakdown of lipid in adipose tissue and synthesis of triglyceride. Third, effect on protein and nucleic acid metabolism, they promote transcription and proteins. They also cause catabolic effect in hepatic tissue which result in enhanced degradation of protein. من خلال الافكت او glucocorticoid هرمون راح نشوف احنا من يصير عندنا disorder in the adrenal gland اللي خلالها راح يصير اما over secretion or decrease secretion of this hormone. نلاحظ زيادة أو نقصان الكورتيزول أو الكورتيكون على الجسم من خلال تأثيره على الجلوكوز، الليبيد والبروتين. إذن الكورتيزول important in glucose level and decrease lipid protein. They increase the lipolysis and increase protein degradation or breakdown. Also effect on water and electrolyte metabolism. Them cause an increased production of antidiuretic, which can decrease glomerular filtration, causing water retention in the body. This is important also because the cortisol effect on the water and electrolyte metabolism will decrease glomerular filtration, cause more water retention in the body. 5. Effect on the immune system. Cortisol suppress the immune response and indirectly by affecting most cells that reaction and reaction. الكورتيزول أنطينا احنا بالجدول أدوية كثيرة تعمل عمل الكورتيزول، الكورتيكوستيرويد، واستخداماتها كلها بالمختلف الأمراض. ذلك مسألة أنه وعادة نحن استخدامات هذا الكورتيزول لفترات، قد يكون بعض الأمراض لفترات طويلة، لذلك لازم ناخذ بنظر الاعتبار of these drugs, of these cortisol effects, water and electrolyte, major protein lipid metabolism. It is a powerful anti-inflammatory even when secreted at the normal level. This is the reason why strong corticosteroid and prednisolone are used with all disease involving inflammatory process, including autoimmune disease. Because it is anti-inflammatory. نشوف أن نستخدم هذه الدراجز أو these الكورتيكوستيرويد باستخدام واسع ومختلف، ومثل ما قلنا لازم نلاحظ أنهم side effect of these drugs تأثيرها على electrolyte, water and protein, lipid and glucose. Adrenal medullary hormone, هنا hormone that's from the adrenal medulla. Cells in the adrenal medulla synthesis and secrete epinephrine, norepinephrine. Catecholamine differ considerably among species. And 80 of the output is epinephrine. Following release, hormone bind to adrenergic receptor on target cell, where they induce essentially the same effect as the stimulation. مثل ما قلنا إنه الأدرينال الكنترول of these hormone epinephrine and norepinephrine by sympathetic stimulation and release هو الابنفرين act on the target to increase the outcome to make their effect. Catecholamine or norepinephrine from the tyrosine. The precursor for the synthesis of the catecholamine is the amine, which is taken up by the chromophore cell and converted to the norepinephrine through the steps. الخطوة الأولى for of the epinephrine and norepinephrine from tyrosine, amino acid tyrosine, and then taken by the cells of the adrenal medulla to the hydroxyphenylalanine اللي هو will be converted to the dopamine, and dopamine will be converted to the norepinephrine, and norepinephrine converted to the epinephrine. احنا قلنا بالنسبة للكورتيزول أو الكورتيكوس synthesis from the cortex. الادرينال ميدلر هرمون اللي في النورابinephrine are synthesis from the amino acid tyrosine, then dopamine and norepinephrine. Norepinephrine and epinephrine are stored in dense granule, which also contain ATP, and several neuropeptide secretion of hormone is stimulated by acetylcholine release of the preganglionic sympathetic fiber, innervating the medulla through the sympathetic stimulation. Many types of stresses stimulate, including exercise, hypoglycemia, trauma. Following secretion into the blood, the catechols the two and are carried in the circulation, and perhaps other certain protein. Now the stress, sympathetic stimulation, decrease the level, all lead to the stimulation of the release of the norepinephrine and epinephrine. Important to maintain normal level of glucose, also to make a defense stress for the business. The effect of the stress on the body شنو البريكيشن او شو يصير عندنا من يصير عندنا stimulation and release of the epinephrine and complex physiological responses of the stimulation because they are differentially expressed different tissue and cells. The alpha and beta عندنا alpha and beta adrenergic receptor and their subtypes were defined by differential binding of virus against and حسب الستيميوليشن والانهبيشن راح يأثر على الريسبتور وبالتالي الافكت of these hormones. More recently by analysis of molecular اللي هو الافكت of these hormones. The effect of medullary hormone injecting and norepinephrine release from the have the same effect on target organ as direct stimulation by the sympathetic nerve. Their effect is long. What is the effect of these hormones? It is increased rate and force of contract muscle, the rate and contract heart muscle. Constriction of the blood vessel causes wide resulting real blood راح يزيد عندي blood vessel constriction وبالتالي يسوي لي increase blood pressure. Stimulation of the lipolysis in fat cell, this provides the acid for energy because decrease in the energy فراح يصير عندنا for the reduction and promote breakdown of the glycogen in the skeleton, provide glucose for production. And it is increase the of glycogen, which is the storage form in the liver, also break fat or to supply with the energy production. Of the cortisol during stress any the body stress must be simultaneously provide more. احنا نتعرض الجسم لأني ستريس راح اننا يصير نسميها انه زيد السيشن of the adrenal hormone, adrenal medulla to the increase of blood glucose, mobilize fat and protein for backup supply of glucose, modify immune, heartbeat, blood pressure, alertness, nervous system responsiveness. If cortisol level cannot rise in response, maintaining your body under stress حتى نحافظ على هذه الوعية. تعرض الجسم إلى أي ستريس راح secretion of this hormone to the increase blood pressure, alertness of the brain, بالimmune reaction الدفاعية نتيجة زيادة secretion of ابنفرين and norepinephrine كوسيلة دفاعية للجسم يأخذها عندما يتعرض. would be act on the hypothalamus, on the pituitary, and on the adrenal gland to suppress the release after decrease it. يعني قلنا بالنسبة للcontrol by two mechanisms, by the sympathetic stimulation and by the hypothalamus pituitary axis. This is another diagram يوضح لنا relation between the hormonal and nervous system in controlling the secretion of the adrenal, in control secretion of the adrenal hormone. هذا فيما يخص release of the adrenal medullary hormone. عندنا another system that important in controlling the release of the adrenocorticosteroid هو renin angiotensin aldosterone اللي هو المينرال corticoid hormone. الرنين is a proteolytic enzyme secreted by the juxtaglomerular cells of the juxtaglomerular apparatus. First, by baroreceptors and chemoreceptors of the juxtaglomerular apparatus are sensitive to the hypovolemia, والhypovolemia راح يؤدي لريز للرنين. الرنين concentration of the sodium also important in stimulation of the renin. Second, the renin angiotensin is also stimulated by the sympathetic nervous system. And third, by the then decrease blood volume, decrease blood pressure, and by the sympathetic stimulation lead to the stimulate renin release from the juxtaglomerular apparatus. And this is secretion of the renin lead to the activation of the angiotensin hormone and convert angiotensin 1 to the angiotensin 2. Then it leads to the stimulation of the aldosterone from the zona glomerulized, from the corticosteroid. إذا تلاحظون أننا إحنا the control for the release of the aldosterone هو يعتمد على hypotension, على blood pressure, for the release of the renin from the juxtaglomeratus. The end result هو by the conversion angiotensin 1 to the angiotensin T, angiotensin 2, and stimulation of the aldosterone. الالدوستيرون مثل ما هو enhance reabsorption of the sodium و excretion the potassium. So in the reabsorption the sodium or excretion of the increase of the potassium, it leads to the increase of the aldosterone secretion for more secretion of the potassium in the urine. Adrenal disorder is الآن عرفنا أن the main hormone that releases from the adrenal gland from two different parts, وعرفنا synthesis of the corticosteroid hormone, adrenal medullary hormone, وعرفنا أيضا the effect of both الcorticosteroid and adrenal medullary. الآن راح نتطرق certain adrenal gland disorders اللي هو disorder of the adrenal cortex and disorder of the adrenal medulla. عندنا نوعين disorder, either an increase or insufficiency of the decrease in the adrenal hormone, hypoaldosteronism. الإكزامبل عليها هو الأديسون ديزيز والcongenital adrenal hyperplasia. النوع الثاني أو disorder الآخر هو الادرينال over production hyperadrenalism اللي هو Cushing syndrome and Cohen syndrome. الديسوردر of the adrenal medulla راح نتطرق للفيوكروموسايتوما. هذه certain disorder of the adrenal cortex. Then important insufficiency. There is decrease in the synthesis of adrenal hormone, and these lead to the formation of the Addison disease or hypoadrenalism, and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. While the adrenal overproduction, more production of the adrenal hormone اللي هو Cushing syndrome and Cohen syndrome. وفي ما يخص النورابنفرين disorder هو الفيوكروموسايتوما. نجي على الفيز هو الادرينال insufficiency, decrease of production of corticosteroid hormones, impairment, synthesis and or release of adrenocortical hormone, classified as primary aldosteronism, result from disease intrinsic to the adrenal cortex, or secondary result from the impaired release or effect of adrenocorticotropic hormone from the pituitary gland, and result from the impaired release or effect of the corticotropic releasing from the hypothalamus. مثل ما قلنا احنا الكنترول for the release of the corticosteroid hormone هو في هذا hypothalamus pituitary axis. لذلك راح نشوفون ان عندنا 3 classified adrenal insufficiency either primary بمعنى انه disease of the adrenal gland itself, disease of the adrenal cortex, وذاك there is no more production of these hormones, or secondary non-effect, impairment at the level of the pituitary gland. There is no more adrenocorticotropic hormone released from the pituitary, so no more corticosteroid hormone will be released, or tertiary result of at the level of the hypothalamus. There is no release of the corticotropic releasing hormone. احنا راح نحكي على الاديسون ديزيز او ادرينال insufficiency. راح نحكي على البرايمري تايب اللي هو due to the disease of the adrenal gland itself. The adrenocortical insufficiency due to the destruction or dysfunction of the entire adrenal cortex. معنى عندي disease affecting the adrenal cortex. It affects both glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid function. The onset of disease, usually 90% or more of both adrenal cortex are dysfunction or destroyed. Non-disease affect the adrenal cortex, lead to the decrease in production of corticosteroid hormone. The Addison disease or the hypoadrenalism اللي هو is the production of corticosteroid hormone as a result of disease of the adrenal gland. Fail adrenal cortical to produce adrenocortical hormone are most frequently caused by primary atrophy of the adrenal cortex caused by autoimmunity against the cortex. These processes are gradual, leading to the progressive reduction in glucocorticoid and mineralocorticoid function. As a result of the decreased cortisol secretion, there is a compensatory increase in ACTH secretion which produce hyperpigmentation. هنا عندنا نقطة مهمة. بما أنه عندي disease or defect or dysfunction in the adrenal cortical hormone, the corticosteroid hormone, both mineralocorticoid or glucocorticoid اللي هو aldosterone or cortisol will be affected. At the same time, the level of adrenocorticotropic hormone from the pituitary will be increased. ليش؟ لأن احنا قلنا there is no more production of adrenocortical hormone. ذاك يصير عندي stimulation by the ACTH from the pituitary, which lead to the increased hyperpigmentation of the skin. المينرال كورتيكويد deficiency بالاديسون ديزيز، اذا قل عند المينرال كورتيكويد، اذا قل عند الالدوستيرون، dose of sodium, hypovolemia, hypotension, and increased plasma renin activity. potassium retention, hyperkalemia. اذا صار عندي الالدوستيرون قليل راح يصير عندي loss of sodium، والبوتاسيوم يزداد، الصوديوم راح يكون قليل والبوتاسيوم يزداد. هو هذا عكس عمل الالدوستيرون. ان الالدوستيرون هو يسوي لي بالنورمال way increase the retention of the sodium and enhance secretion of the potassium. When deficiency in the aldosterone it lead excessive loss of sodium، وبالتالي راح يسوي لي hypovolemia and decrease the blood pressure. بالمقابل راح يصير عندي increase level of the blood اللي هي hyperkalemia. At the level of the glucocorticoid اللي هو cortisol deficiency, abnormal carbohydrate, fat and protein metabolism result in muscle weakness, fasting hypoglycemia and impaired utilization of fat for the energy. راح نشوف عندنا يصير عندنا هذا muscle weakness because of use of breakdown of the protein، ويصير عندنا fasting hypoglycemia because no more glucose will be formed by the process of gluconeogenesis, and impaired utilization of fat for the energy. The inability to secrete increased amount of cortisol during stress lead to the Addisonian crisis. وهاي النقطة المهمة. قلنا احنا يصير عندنا ستريس، لكن ما راح يصير عندي بالمقابل هذا الستريس secretion of the cortisol hormone اللي تعمل على زيادة البلد بريشر، على زيادة الهارت ريت، على all the sympathetic stimulation. فبالتالي راح تخلي البيشنت او البيرسون عرضة to the what is called Addisonian crisis that may end in death if supplementation doses of adrenocortical hormone are not admitted. إذا ما نعطي supplementation of the corticosteroid hormone قد ينتهي المريض بالنسبة له. الأديسونيان crisis or acute adrenal insufficiency or decreased production of the adrenal hormone. It manifests by vomiting, hypotension, dehydration that evolve rapidly to circulatory shock اللي راح يصير عندهم بالتالي الصدمة. واحدة من العلامة المهمة للأديسونيان crisis or الأديسون disease or decreased production of adrenal hormone هو الهايبربيجمنتيشن الناتج من زيادة الأدرينوكورتيكوتروبيك hormone from the pituitary. Hyperpigmentation of the skin and mucous membrane and may progressive to the weakness, flaccid muscle paralysis and death. لذلك هاي الأديسونيا كرايسيس أو أديسون ديزيز مهم الدايجنوزيس مالته، لأن يعتمد على التعويض الكورتيكوستيرويد هرمون حتى ما نوصل للمراحل المتقدمة بالديزيز وقد تأتينا بالنسبة للdeath of the patient. عندنا هنا اللابوراتوري انفستيجيشن، عندنا سانكاتين ستيبيليشن تيست. هذا التيست يعتمد على نقيس الليفل اوف ذا كورتيكوستيرويد على الادرينال هرمون، measuring level of cortisol in the blood before and after half and 1 hour, minutes after injection of 25 to 150 microgram synthetic ACTH. نحن نعطي synthetic ACTH If the adrenal gland are function, cortisol level will be rise response to the ACTH stimulation. If they are damaged or non-function, response to ACTH will be minimal. احنا هنا بهذا التست راح نقيس الليفل اوف كورتيزول اللي نقيسه بالبلد، وبعدين ننطي 250 مايكروغرام اوف اي سي تي اتش ساينتيتيك اي سي تي اتش. من ننطي اي سي تي اتش بهالحاله المفروض شنو؟ الليفل اوف ذا كورتيزول فروم ذا adrenal gland should be increase in normal person. لكن في حالة إذا كان عندي disease of the adrenal cortex راح there is no more cortisol will be released in response to the synthetic ACTH اللي انطيناه، وبالتالي level of زيادة level of cortisol will be no change، راح يقل عند level of cortisol. ACTH baseline test to evaluate whether or not the pituitary is producing appropriate amount of the ACTH. هنا أيضا لازم أسوي أنا شنو؟ لقيس الليفل of the ACTH قبل ما ننطي scientific one حتى أفرق بين primary والsecondary hypoadrenalism. ليش؟ لكن إذا عندي ال ACTH هو be defective from the pituitary فمعناها أنهم الديفكت مو at the level of the adrenal gland at the level of the pituitary gland. فلازم أقيس ال ACTH before giving the synthetic one، وأقيس أيضا الكورتيزول level. Low ACTH level indicates secondary adrenal insufficiency. Secondary معناه عندي الديفكت بالبيتوتري اللي ما قاعد تطلع لي ACTH على ما تسوي الستيميوليشن to the cortisol release. while high level indicate primary adrenal insufficiency اللي هو Addison disease. فقلنا إذا كان عندي level of ACTH عالي هذا secondary بعد ما نشوف اللقب also important in which there is decreased production of adrenal hormone or adrenal is congenital adrenal hypertension. Congenital adrenal hypertension is the group of autosomal recessive disorder in which genetic defect results in the deficiency of enzyme essential for the synthesis of the cortisol. There are several forms of congenital adrenal, most common of which is the 21 hydroxylase deficiency occurring in the over 90% of all cases. The most important enzyme is the 21 hydroxylase. نرجع للمخطط اللي ذكرناه synthesis of the adrenal hormone. نلاحظ هنا ونشوف إذا صار عندي 21 deficiency there is no more aldosterone. إذا صار عندي defect هنا enzyme اللي مسؤول version progesterone to deoxycorticosterone. Ali, the progesterone will be converted to 17 hydroxyprogesterone. أصلاً هذه الخطوة هذا الستيب الثاني ما راح تتم لأن هنا ديفكت بنفس الإنزيم اللي هو 21 هيدروكسيليز إنزيم، وبالتالي cortisol will be formed. Then no aldosterone, all the component will be converted to the dehydrogesterone and the formation of the testosterone or androgen. أنه defect بال 21 hydroxylase enzyme formation of cortisol or androgen. اللي يكون عندي فقط هو التستيرون الأندروجين. وبالتالي the main symptom, the main presentation for the congenital adrenal hyperplasia, what is called ambiguous genital, اللي هنا في ambiguous genital يكون انه ما تعطيني ايضا انه لا هو فيميل كاركتر. ليش؟ بسبب زيادة التستيرون الاندروجين and decrease cortisol and aldosterone. بالإضافة other symptom هي dehydration, shock, salt loss presentation with electrolyte imbalance, sign of decreased testosterone secretion اللي هي hyponatremia and hyper. The definition of is not well, ما أقدر أميزه it is well, male or female, because of ovulation of the testosterone hormone. بالإضافة sign and symptom of decreased cortisol and aldosterone اللي هو dehydration, shock, hyponatremia, hyperkalemia and decreased hyperpigmentation. And then في حالة decrease production of adrenal diseases اللي هو الأديسون disease والcongenital adrenal hyperplasia. نيجي على الديسوردر الثاني over production of the adrenal هو hyperadrenalism secretion by the adrenal cause a complex cascade hormone effect called Cushing's syndrome. important syndrome اللي هو Cushing's syndrome اللي هو over production of the adrenal. It can occur from the multiple causes, either adenoma of the anterior pituitary lead to the increased ACTH, increased adrenal hyperplasia, and increased cortisol secretion. Defect in the tumor of the anterior pituitary سوال زيادة بالACTH overproduction of the cortisol. Abnormal function of lead to the raising hormone to the increased at the defect level of the hypothalamus. Third, an ectopic secretion of ZTH by the tumor body, the tumor خاصة tumor of the lung يعمل البيتوتري gland produce ACTH نسميه ectopic secretion يعني خارج الباثوي of hyperpituitary axis. Adenoma of the adrenal cortex نفس الtumor affect the adrenal cortex due to the overproduction of the and by a large amount of exogenous glucocorticoid. وهاي لأن مثل ما كنا احنا استخدام كورتيكوستيرويد وعادة استخداماته بالمخدرات ولفترات طويلة ذاك احنا ذا كميات ولفترة قد تنتهي بوجود الهايبر ادريناليزم او الكوشنج. نقصد بالكوشنج syndrome when syndrome is secondary to excess secretion of ACTH by anterior pituitary. احنا قلنا بالنسبة للكوشنج syndrome او نقول انه over production of ACTH from the pituitary. يعني defect at the level of lead to the increased ACTH وبالتالي cortisol will be formed. More cortisol will be formed. نيجي نشوف شنو ال presentation of Cushing syndrome caused by prolonged exposure of the body tissue to high level of hormone cortisol. Cushing syndrome is also called hypercorticolism or hyperadrenalism or syndrome. The symptom of Cushing syndrome is important. The patient usually upper body obesity, moon, neck, يصير عندهم obese يسميه buff face وجه or moon face عادة because of retention of water راح increase the weight وأيضا because of the specific criteria of the face اللي هو moon face increase fat بقفل لهم neck the subcutaneous fat tissue will be increased. هذه النقطة كلش مهمة تخلي certain female high doses of steroid or corticosteroid حتى تحصل على هذا الفيس اللي هو مون فيس. طبعا هذا bad habit and risky because of increased side effect of the cortisol level in the body. وقلنا راح نشوف السيكونس مال increase الهاي level lead to the on the arm and leg لا انه يكون arm are thin because of over or breakdown of protein and fat. It leads to the delayed growth and easy bruising of the skin. يصير عندهم بسرعة يصير عندهم bleeding. Purpose or being stretch mark on the abdomen يصير عندهم نسميها سترايا أو خطوط على الأبدومن. Thigh, buttocks, arm and breast. لذلك نشوف هذه الفيشر أو هذه الساين سيمتوم مال over protection of cortisol اللي تعطينا specific criteria نسميها البيشنت يقولون على الليمون اون ستيك يعني بيشبهوه مثل الليمون اللي واقفة على عيدان ثقاب. ليش؟ راح يكون منفوخ من الوسط بالفيس لكن أطرافه السفلى والعليا تكون ويك و قابل للخطوط السترايا وقابل للإيزي بروزنج اللي هو بليدنج. هذا المين ساين اوف كوشينج سيندروم. السيمتوم طبعا راح يصير عنده هاي بلد جلوكوز او هاي بلد شوجر, high blood pressure, depression and anxiety, decreased hair growth in women, irregular menstrual cycle, bone are fragile, susceptible to the fracture easily. تصبح عندنا كل البون bruising, bleeding, increased blood pressure, increased blood glucose. كلها all these are the effect of high level of the cortisol. عندنا هنا diagram الصورة توضح لنا هذا اللي حكينا sign and symptom of the Cushing syndrome. تلاحظون هنا بالنسبة للفيس buffy face or moon face. هذا نشوف النيك هنا بها السبكوتينيوس fat tissue will be increase هنا بالنسبة له, لكن في نفس الوقت أيضا نشوف عنده الارم and legs يكونون weak, the abdominal سترايا اللي خطوط, وهذا الشكل مميز because of hormone الكورتيزول and high dose and for long picture of Cushing syndrome. عندنا حتى تشخص هذا الكوشنج syndrome قلنا هو عندي هنا defect at the level of the pituitary that secrete more TTH. فشرحنا هنا راح نعطي dexamethasone اللي هو synthetic cortisol is an exogenous steroid that provide negative feedback to the pituitary to suppress the secretion of CTH. احنا هنا راح اعطي اني dexamethasone اللي هو كورتيزول. المفروض هذا شو يسوي لي؟ يسوي لي suppression to the ACTH from the pituitary. This barrier which is allow the test to assess the specific part of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal. Specifically, dexamethasone bind to the glucocorticoid receptor in the pituitary gland, which lie outside the blood-brain barrier, resulting in regulatory modulation of the release of the cortisol. A single dose of dexamethasone is often helpful. A dose of 25-30 microgram per kg, maximum 2 milligram, given at 11 p.m. results in plasma cortisol level of less than 5 microgram at a.m. Cushing in the next morning, the normal individual, but not in patient with Cushing syndrome. أنا راح أنطي راح أنطي دexamethasone اللي هو synthetic cortisol. هذا المفروض يسوي لي suppression to the level of the ACTH from the pituitary. لكن طالما عندي هنا tumor, عندي disease of the pituitary gland, there is a continuous process of the production of the ACTH from the pituitary. وبالتالي الدexamethasone أو الكورتيزول اللي انطيته ما راح يأثر على excretion of the يسوي لي suppression to the ACTH from the pituitary. A low dose dexamethasone suppress cortisol in individual with no pathological endogenous cortisol production. A high dose dexamethasone exerts negative feedback on pituitary ACTH, producing cell but no on ectopic ACTH. لكن يعني حتى أسوي suppression ACTH from the pituitary أحتاج إلى high dose from the dexamethasone تسوي لي suppression. لكن بنفس الوقت هذا ما راح يسوي لي suppression from the ectopic ACTH اللي قلنا يطلع خارج from other part like from the lung or of the lung. Low dose dexamethasone suppression and no cortisol level upon administration of low dose dexamethasone, while in Cushing disease involve no change in cortisol or low dose dexamethasone, but inhibition of the cortisol on high dose dexamethasone. مثل ما قلنا انه ما راح يصير عنده inhibition وبالتالي ما راح يأثر على الدم. لا تنطي dose of dexamethasone يعني يسوي suppression to the endogenous cortisol. الأذر disease اللي هو Cohen syndrome characterized by excessive secretion of aldosterone from the adrenal gland. Cushing syndrome قلنا هو زيادة في production of corticosteroid hormone response to the increased ACTH level. بالCohen syndromes overproduction or oversecretion of the mineralocorticoid hormone اللي هو aldosterone. Also for a primary hypertestosterone produced by one hormone benign tumor commonly occur in adults between the age of 30 and 50 and most common cause of secondary hypertension, more common in women than men, and presence of hypokalemia with hypertension suggests possible primary hypertension. بما عندي over secretion of the aldosterone فبالتالي يكون level بوتاسيوم قليل the Cohen syndrome or primary aldosteronism, the main excessive aldosterone secondary to the adrenal tumor, to retain sodium and excrete potassium, result in alkalosis, hypertension, and inability of the kidney to concentrate the urine, where the serum become concentrated. Hypokalemia interfere with the insulin secretion, thus will have glucose intolerance as well, or increase the blood glucose level. The last disorder of the adrenal medulla, where overproduction of the adrenal medulla hormone اللي هو الابنفرين and norepinephrine اللي فيه chromocytoma. It is a neuroendocrine tumor of the medulla of the adrenal gland, originating in the chromatin cell or extra tissue that fail to improve after birth and secrete excessive amount of catecholamine, usually adrenaline epinephrine, if in the adrenal gland, and norepinephrine. The pheochromocytoma, usually it is mainly due to the tumor affecting the adrenal part of the adrenal medulla. It usually can occur at any age, but usually between 40 and 50 years old. It can be familial, it can be inherited or familial, and may be associated with thyroid carcinoma or parathyroid hyperplasia or tumor. The main feature of the pheochromocytoma were headache, palpitation, 150 over 50, and may have hyperglycemia related to the excess epinephrine secretion, tremors اللي هو يصير عندهم رجفة بالإيدين, flushing, anxiety as well as, بالإضافة إلى blurring of vision, feeling of impending doom, إنه يشكى هذا المريض إنه near to die, يقول إنه قريب بيصير عنده high blood pressure, تعرق, يصير عنده flashing, يصير عنده tremor. هاي كلها sign and symptom of increased catecholamine or adrenaline and noradrenaline from the adrenal medulla because of the disease or tumor of the adrenal medulla. هذا فيما يخص محاضرة اليوم, شوية بها